Alright guys, so here we are today with the Chevy Sonic. We got it lifted off the ground. We are replacing the rear drums. Old, new. The drums are made by Rebestos. And I got the new pads from Power Stop. Those are the old factory ones. And then that's what it's going to look like when it's done. Got the new Power Stop pads, cleaned up all the springs, cylinder, got the wheel bearing right here, got everything in there. Got the little emergency brake back there with the green tab, another spring in there. So overall, here's how you should go about doing it. I would jack up both the whole back end of the car. Make sure you let it rest on jack stands. That way you don't have to worry about a jack failing, hydraulics, anything like that. Make sure it's in the set place and make sure it is on the pinch weld. If you put it on here, it will crease this whole part in. So once you do that, if you have a manual, leave it in gear. That way the front end will lock it up. Put blocks underneath the front wheels if you want. That way it prevents it from rolling back too, just in case it does happen to pop out of gear or anything like that. Now at first, what you're going to want to do is you're going to leave the emergency brake on. And I'll tell you why. When you pull these rotors off, drums, now you have the 5 lug nut holes, but then you have this extra hole as well, which actually has a screw right here that will drive into it. That on the hub, it'll actually line up with the wheel bearing itself, and then it basically just screws in, just like a little overhand tight. Both mine weren't even that tight; they were just a little overhand tight. And in order to take it off, you are going to need star bit. Alright, so this T30 bit will go into the screw, and then you just screw it out. If you're using a mini socket, you can just run a 1/4 inch socket, drop it in there. I'm running an extension with it, that way it's a little bit easier. But yeah, besides that, to take all the springs off, I'd get needle nose pliers. You can either use a straight one or one with a curved head. This is one of the straight ones. And then a flathead screwdriver. If you get a skinnier flathead screwdriver, one that's not going to bend on you, then that'll help you out. But we're going to go ahead over to the other side. I already did this side. It's all cleaned up. Got the new pads on it. Put all this on. Drop the new rotor on so you guys can see what it looks like. So line it up with that hole on that. And then you take your little star bit and screw, go ahead and screw it in. Like I said, little overhand sight. Then you got that one on. Now let's head over to the other side. I already have the wheel off and all of that. So we're basically going to be going from looking like that to what you just saw over there. Same thing, you'll see screws there. I already loosened it up. Take the screw out, smack on the drum a little bit. I tapped it with a hammer. You may have to wiggle it a little bit. drums off. Now the easiest way I found to get in here was if you just run flathead screwdriver either towards this side and knock off the spring that's right here. Just get behind there, knock the spring off, and then basically this whole side will release itself. But the main thing the pliers is for is these little tabs. You basically just grab it and you twist it. You can see it has like a cross mark. One side's big enough for it to fit through and the other side locks it in place. So you may taste it, spin it around. You need to use both hands for this. Try to show you guys. So you get in there with the screwdriver and you push down on one side just to get the tension away from it, and then you grab it with the pliers and then you spin it. You push down and spin it, and then that'll release the spring and the little cap. Put that down, don't lose it. Same thing with the other side. There. Basically just press down on it. Release that side. Now it'll wiggle, so you have some wiggle room now. Now what you're gonna want to do, get your screwdriver back up behind this little spring and try to pry it away from this. So I'm gonna get in there, do that. Alright, so now that the spring's pressed away, the calipers basically shoot away from each other. You can reach in there, pull this metal piece out. It comes out in two sections if you look at it. Top piece, bottom piece, and then the adjusters. You can go ahead and spin it back in since you're going to be it's going to be all new stuff, so you can just readjust it back in because it's self-adjusting. It'll basically grab that gear on that, but I'm not going to talk about that really. Kick that off. You're going to have to save this piece for the new one. It'll slide on there. And then, now these are also labeled too. This is basically going to be another section of the emergency brake, so hold on to that. Take this spring out. The spring is actually curved in the back, as you can see. So you basically just pop it in, twist it. That'll be the top portion of the spring. And then you still have the tabs. Now be careful, because these little tabs that had the springs on them, the spring retainers, they can actually pop out of the back right here. So push those out of the way. Pad will drop down. Get away from that spring. And then the safe bet, just leave it the way it is. That way you can kind of remember how the pad went on. I know how to do it, but I'm just doing it so you guys can have a little bit of a reference. This bottom spring, and then as you can see, it hooks in to the emergency brake right down here, and it'll pull apart. So then there's that, and like I said, you can get in here, clean up that. This is the cylinder. Don't push too hard on one side because it will pop the other side out. And then you still have these things, little posts. Like I said, these can go all the way out the back. Don't lose those. So then what you do, grab your new pads at the left. So you put the left in. Make sure this grabs this. Reach in the back and grab that little tab so you can run it through that middle hole. And then line it up right up with the cylinder. Now this is the part that kind of turns into a pain, because then you have to hold that, and while holding that, you have to drop the spring back into it. You have to drop the spring back in, and like I said, it's not a soft spring, so don't let that fool you, it's not soft. And then the best way to do it is line up this with that. Big side will slide over. You take the spring, put it down, put the cap on top of the spring while you're holding it. You're now going to have to push that in, and this is where it comes in handy to have one of those, a thinner screwdriver, so you can kind of twist it a little bit. So that'll hold it a little bit, and while it's holding it, go back in there with your pliers, grab it, screwdriver, push it in, and twist it so it locks it in place. And now you can readjust it a little bit. Make sure it's centered on the piston up here. Make sure it's centered on the piston. Make sure it's back behind this bracket. I'm going to squeeze those two together. And the next one you're going to want to do is you're going to want to take this after it's all the way swiveled back in, and it has a little locking portion on it, so lock it in. And then you're going to take it and you're going to go, there's the big side goes towards the back of the caliper, and the shorter side goes on the little emergency brake plate. And let that sit up there. And then you're going to do the same thing with the other side here. You're going to take this brake and make sure that stays on, because it's going to try to snap off every single chance it gets. So just a warning. And then you slide back over here. Same thing, hold it in place. Make sure this back piece rests against that. Try to get the bottom lined up. Run it through the little tab. And then put your bracket back on. It literally just slides over it. And while that's doing that, pull it back a little bit, and you're gonna have to line up the teeth on this with this. So basically, like I said, on this side, on that shaft, the more open side goes towards the back, and the shorter open side comes on the outside. So you just go ahead, you line those two up. And make sure you're still holding it, because it will fall off. Out of the way. And there. And then you have that locked in. And now all you have to do is do the same thing with this. Put that spring and that little retainer on, and then it'll hold it all together. And then you got to drop the springs on in place. But let's get the spring on and retainer. And same thing, line it up. And then using the flathead screwdriver once again, use it to force it down over it. And like I said, it does take a little bit. You're gonna have to Definitely not something you want to try to do it with one hand. You can even get back there straight. Try to keep that pin straight. See, the second one's always the hardest one because now you have to try to hold everything else that's up there together without shifting it around, or it's going to come apart. You can also try putting the spring in up top too, and it'll help steady up the top. Which is probably what I'm going to do because that is not cooperating at all. So we'll lock that up. We'll take the spring. The hook side goes around the back of this little lever. What you're going to have to do first is run it through the other side, and then same thing, you're going to have to take it and stretch it. So there's that. That's in place now.